When Americans first arrive in Canada, they usually notice the obvious things: the politeness, the snow, the calmness, the friendliness. But those are only the surface-level differences. It's not until they stay longer, settle into a routine, and experience Canada beyond the first impression stage that they begin to feel the deeper shifts happening around them. They start realizing that Canada has a completely different emotional rhythm, one that isn't loud, dramatic, or rushed. It's subtle, quiet, soft. Everyday interactions feel gentler. Ordinary moments feel lighter. There's less tension in the air, fewer social pressures, and a kind of natural calmness woven into daily life. Americans slowly discover that Canada doesn't try to impress you with grand gestures. It reveals itself through small routines, small kindnesses, and small differences that slowly build into something much bigger. It's in these hidden layers, the ones tourists don't see, where Americans truly begin to understand why life in Canada feels so different. At first, Americans think Canadians are just very polite. But soon they realize politeness here isn't just behavior. It's a social operating system. Canadians communicate in a completely different way, using subtle cues Americans don't immediately recognize. People hold doors longer than expected. They apologize even when they aren't at fault. They speak softer in public spaces as if everyone is sharing the same atmosphere and wants to keep it peaceful. Even disagreements sound polite. Instead of saying, "You're wrong," Canadians might say, "I see what you mean, but maybe there's another way to look at it." Instead of confrontation, there's compromise. Instead of dominance, there's respect. This courtesy code shows up everywhere: in grocery store lines, in traffic, in elevators, at work. Americans are used to directness. Fast, clear, straight-to-the-point communication. But in Canada, people are careful with each other, almost protective of one another's comfort. And the more time Americans spend here, the more they understand that this isn't politeness for show. It's genuine. It's cultural. It's who Canadians are. One of the biggest shocks for Americans is the overall pacing of life in Canada. It's not slow. It's steady, balanced, controlled. People don't rush for no reason. They don't push through crowds or speed walk past strangers like they're late to something critical. Even in busy cities like Toronto and Vancouver, there's a sense of order and calmness that feels unusual to Americans who are used to high-intensity environments where everything feels urgent. Restaurants don't constantly turn tables or hover near your booth with the check. Workers take proper breaks, actual lunch hours, not eating at their desks while answering emails. People step outside to breathe instead of powering through the day at full speed, fueled by caffeine and adrenaline. There's less honking, fewer arguments in public, and almost no sense of chaos. Waiting in line doesn't feel like a competitive sport. Conversations happen at a natural rhythm, without someone checking their phone every 30 seconds. It's like the entire country is moving at a sustainable pace rather than an exhausting one. Americans notice that life here still has ambition and drive, but without the burnout, without the stress, without the background pressure they've grown used to carrying everywhere. There's no glorification of being busy or wearing exhaustion like a badge of honor. People work hard, but they also go home. They have hobbies. They see friends without scheduling weeks in advance. And after a while, the quiet stability of Canadian life becomes one of the differences they appreciate the most. It's not about doing less. It's about living more intentionally, more calmly, and with room to actually enjoy the moment. Americans know Canada is beautiful. They've seen the pictures, the mountains, the lakes, the forests. But what they don't expect is how deeply nature is woven into daily life here. Even people who aren't outdoorsy find themselves drawn to parks, lakesides, walking trails, and mountain views. In Canadian cities, nature isn't separate from the urban environment, it's part of it. There are bike paths everywhere, green spaces every few blocks, and water views in places you wouldn't expect. People walk more. They slow down to enjoy sunsets. They stop to appreciate quiet moments. It's not unusual to see someone take a detour after work just to enjoy a peaceful view. To Americans, who often live in cities where nature takes effort to find, this feels refreshing. It changes the way they think, the way they plan their day, and the way they handle stress. Over time, Americans realize that life in Canada feels different because nature isn't something you escape to. It's something you live inside. And that connection changes everything. One of the most surprising shifts Americans experience in Canada isn't about laws or taxes. It's the emotional relationship Canadians have with money. In the US, spending is fast, loud, and encouraged. Bigger houses, bigger cars, bigger portions, everything pushes you toward more. But in Canada, the financial culture feels calmer, almost softer. Canadians think twice before making big purchases. They choose modest cars, not because they can't afford more, but because they don't feel pressured to constantly upgrade. They buy fewer things, keep items longer, and take pride in using what they already have. Even tipping, something that feels stressful and unpredictable in the US, has clearer expectations in Canada. But the biggest shock is the way healthcare changes American psychology. For the first time, Americans experience life where one accident, one illness, one emergency won't destroy their savings. That single difference removes a type of fear they didn't even realize they were carrying. And it quietly transforms the way daily life feels. Suddenly, things aren't as tense, not as heavy, not as urgent. Money exists, but it doesn't control everything. And that emotional lightness is one of the biggest reasons life in Canada feels different, even if most people never say it out loud. Americans often say Canada feels like a place where people still care about each other. And they don't mean it in a cliché way. They mean it literally. Canadians check on elderly neighbors during snowstorms. They hold the elevator for strangers. They help push a stranger's car out of a snowbank without hesitation. Even the humor feels like a community tool. Soft, sarcastic, comforting. Public spaces are cleaner, not because there are more rules, but because people genuinely respect shared environments. Neighbors talk, but not loudly. Families connect, but without drama. Even in big cities, there's a quiet sense of collective responsibility that Americans aren't used to. And the strangest part? It's not forced, not performative. It's simply part of the cultural DNA. In the US, community often appears during special events or emergencies. But in Canada, community is woven into everyday life, built through small interactions, small kindnesses, small moments of respect. It's not loud, but it's always there. And Americans feel the difference immediately. The longer Americans stay in Canada, the more they start to recognize the deeper emotional atmosphere of the country. Canada doesn't overwhelm you. It doesn't demand your attention. It doesn't expect you to compete endlessly just to survive. Instead, it quietly gives you space. Space to breathe, space to think, space to actually live. Life feels more balanced, conversations feel more respectful, and the pace feels more humane. Americans begin noticing how their stress slowly fades, how they sleep better, how they feel safer walking at night, how they enjoy small moments more than they used to. And that's when the truth becomes obvious. Canada didn't change them suddenly. It changed them slowly, through daily experiences, subtle differences, and consistent kindness. Canada doesn't shout its identity. It whispers it. And Americans only realize how powerful that whisper is once they feel it for themselves. Life in Canada may seem familiar on the surface, but once you live inside it, you realize it's built on a completely different emotional foundation. A foundation made of calmness, safety, respect, nature, moderation, and community. The quiet ingredients that shape the Canadian experience. And once Americans understand those deeper layers, they finally see why Canada feels so different and why the feeling stays with them long after they leave. In our next global encounter, we explore the surprising habits and perspectives Americans take back home after living in Canada, the changes that stay with them for life. Make sure you subscribe, because the way Canada transforms people goes far deeper than anyone expects.